Sweet like I'm some kind of cheese. Whatever you say, Brian. Sweet lady, coming next. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to PLD Project Crown Jewels. I am your host, PLD. This is the podcast where I take you through the entirety of the Queen catalog, including the solo ventures, and we listen to every version of the track and try to figure out which one is the best version, the greatest version, the crown jewel version to put into our ultimate playlist. And beyond that, we try to rate the song, rank the song, fun things like that. But if this is your first time here, please hit that like, hit that subscribe. If you're listening audio, join us there as well. Anything you can do to help us out, grow the podcast would be greatly, greatly appreciated. This week's entry, Sweet Lady. It's an interesting track by Brian May, who the band had obviously gotten to a point where they're being very much more eccentric than they used to be, kind of going a little bit away from the rock roots in order to throw the kitchen sink at everything that they could throw the kitchen sink at. You got John Deacon's pop songs, you got Freddie's vaudeville tracks. Brian was always the one who kind of wanted to just make sure we stayed on track a little bit, so we have to throw in his rock numbers with the hard guitar parts. Although interestingly, much like Roger and I'm in Love with My Car, he decided to waltz a little bit too. It's a heavy rock waltz, but I won't say anything more. Let's listen to it, and then I'll come back and talk about it. How to listen to it? Well, you got to pause the podcast at this point. Go look in the description. You're going to see links to YouTube's for all the versions of the tracks we're going to listen to today. There's 3 of them today. The album version from A Night at the Opera. There is an early version, an unreleased version that was on a reel-to-reel tape. And then there's a live version from Hyde Park in 1976, which was on the Making of a Night of the Opera documentary as a bonus track. We'll listen to all 3. We're going to figure out which one is the right one for our playlist. Right now, we're going to pause to listen to the album track, and then we'll be back. Oh, there we have it. Sweet Lady, written by Brian May, featuring Freddie Mercury on lead and backing vocals, Brian May on guitars and backing vocals, John Deacon on bass guitar, Roger Taylor on drums and backing vocals. It's a heavy rock waltz, just like I promised. 3/4 time. It's an uncommon rock and roll time, but it is still a very effective slow burn rock and roll track. This track was played live a little bit sporadically. It was only played really for a couple of years. By June 1977, gone from the set list, had never been seen again. The interesting note from this track, before I get into actually what I listened to, is that the main riff does evolve into the fast version of We Will Rock You. Now, if you are a Queen fan, you know what I'm talking about. You know the fast version is. If you're not as big a fan, you haven't heard this before, We'll Rock You, the famous track from News of the World, 1977, begins with the famous stomp, stomp, clap. That's the whole thing. Stomp, stomp, clap, a little bit of singing, a little bit of guitar solo at the end. There is a full band version, which they call the fast version, which they played live a lot, which we're going to get to. But it's based off the riff of Sweet Lady. It kind of has the guitar part, and it kind of comes from that waltz into the rock and roll. It's an interesting juxtaposition, as you're going to hear when we get there. But that's not now. That's later on. A few quotes we had, both from Roger Taylor. Roger Taylor in 2002 said, "It is a particularly difficult track to play." That was just one quote he had. Another quote from Rhythm Magazine. There's an old song called Sweet Lady, which Brian wrote on A Night at the Opera. And he was saying, I wanted to go like this. And he wanted it to do 3 different things at once. And that was a bit hard to understand. So Roger had a hard time understanding what he wanted to get done, what Brian wanted to get done. And I can understand why. As we listen to it, it has a couple of different styles during there. It opens up with that slow burn rock style, right? It shows some heavy guitar, John playing along nicely, Roger providing that good rhythm. But then, like, it kind of the breakdown happens during the chorus. It's not like really a true chorus. It's just Freddie going "Sweet Lady" while the band is like doing this like breakdown. It's like really fast and furious, and like not like heavy metal, but just fast rock and roll. A lot of guitar riff. The bass is going wild. Roger's got to speed up before it gets back into the lyric again at that point. And speaking of the lyrics, not Brian's best lyrics, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of poked fun at the line at the beginning and the cold open there about, being sweet like a piece of cheese. Brian, you've done better. You've done better. It's not awful, but there are moments that definitely Brian could have probably been better at. The bridge sequence has some great typical Queen harmonies, leading more and more to this really hot breakdown that leads to this jam out ending, which is not a very typical Queen ending. Queen used to have dramatic climax kind of endings. This one has this jam out session which kind of fades out. But it is kind of a fun track. I'm not going to lie. I like it more every time I listen to it. It's not something that sticks in my head that I go, I want to listen to Sweet Lady. When it does come up, it does come on, I do find myself like tapping my toe and bounce my head. And when it gets to those jam sessions specifically, I'm like, this is pretty hot. This is pretty hot. All right, let's move on to our next version we're going to listen to. Well, it's kind of a next version. This is an early mix. It was discovered on a SARM Studios reel-to-reel tape, which it's basically the same version. It's called Early Takes, Early Mix. It's a little bit unpolished. The beginning of it's mostly the same. In fact, on YouTube, there's only the ending. There's only 52 seconds of it. So I'm only going to have you listening to the ending, but you're not missing anything. The whole beginning is pretty much the same as the album version. It just doesn't stop or fade away like it does. We go a little bit further into that jam session, not by a whole lot, but a couple more seconds, about probably 5 or 10 more seconds. And then it has a definitive cutoff. And that's really the big difference. Not enough to listen to the whole track again, but listen to that ending. We'll come back. We'll talk about that real quick.
You bring me down, you shout around, they don't believe that I'm alone.
And there you have it. Not much to say there. Like I said, just a little bit extra on the outro with a definitive ending. I like it because we get more Brian, Roger, and John. And Freddie a little bit has some ad-libs in there. So that's really not much to discuss about it. It's just kind of cool getting a little bit extra. Nice little bonus track, so to speak. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the other alternate version we have. I said it wasn't played live much, but it was played live at their famous concert in 1976 at Hyde Park. This is a great concert, free concert in the park. Hundreds of thousands of people came. And on the Making of a Night at the Opera DVD, they provided this as a bonus track. I guess they were thinking about releasing the live at Hyde Park at one point, but I guess the mixes aren't that great. And what they have recording is enough to snuff. And it would take a lot of work to make it work, considering there's some dropouts here and there. It wasn't worth the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, is what I've basically been told. What we've been told from Queen Productions, but I'm glad we get a little bit of drip in here because this is one song we don't have live anywhere else. So this was a nice bonus to get. Let's listen to that. We'll come back and compare it to the studio versions.
Welcome to our picnic by the Serpentine.
And there it is, the live version. I hope you didn't get tricked by the little pre-trailer for the song. It was a remix or remastering on that YouTube channel. But it's a great version. It's a nice version. It's not, obviously, Brian has those moments, especially at the end of the jam session, where it's a little thinner than the studio version because it's just him on the guitar without having the ability to play a lead and rhythm at the same time. Freddie messes up some words here and there. He's not quite on his game there as far as that goes. But it's really kind of one of those songs that goes so fast you probably wouldn't even notice if you were there, for sure. Freddie's voice is a little strained at points during this is kind of a song he takes down a little bit. Gets some nice harmonies from Roger at the end. Overall, it's a solid version. It's a solid version. But that's the third and final version. So we know what time it is now. We now have to decide which one is the crown jewel. Well, this is an interesting challenge. We have the two versions, which are pretty similar, and we have the live version, but only 3. So we don't have to go through the whole rigmarole like we did for 39, where we have a bunch of different ones to go through. This is an easy 3, 2, 1. I'm going to put the live version at number 3. My least favorite version of the tracks. Again, it's similar enough to the studio version without the complexity. It's got that raw energy, which is nice, but I still feel like if I'm going to listen to the best version of this, I think the studio version is able to hammer it home a little bit more. From a live version standpoint, a lot of times songs can be better live, given the energy, given the crowd. But usually there's some alterations to it, which I like a little bit more. In this case, it's pretty similar. A few vocal takes that are different from Freddie. But overall, I prefer the album version, the studio versions. So which one do I like? The album version, the early version? They're both basically the same track. So in that case, give me more of the band. So I'm going to take the early version. The early version is going to be my crown jewel because I get a few more seconds of Brian, Roger, and John jamming out at the end there. So how could I go wrong there, really? The mix isn't really that sloppy to me. I feel like it's a little unpolished, but I kind of like the jam session feel of it. So that's where we're going to go. Of course, I know that the early version is not one you're going to be able to put on your own Spotify playlist or even listen to the Spotify playlist I'm creating for you, which is also down in the description below. So I will substitute that with the album version. But know that in my own personal crown jewel list, if you ever could find that, or maybe use YouTube Music like I do, you can upload your own unreleased tracks or unofficial tracks or whatever. That's the one I'm going to put. The early version is my crown jewel. So what's next? What do I rate this song? We always go up to 11 here on PLD Project. So between 1 and 11, I'm going to give this one a 6.5. It's not my favorite song on the album. It's probably, honestly, my least favorite song on the album. Maybe it's just too straightforward compared to all the other hijinks the band is up to during this record. But it doesn't mean it's a bad song. But I will say that definitely the jam session brought it up a little bit. Without those jam session moments, it probably would have been down to a 5 or maybe 6. But as it is, with those slow burn jam sessions with that complicated chorus, I do like that a lot. We'll go up to a 6.5, but obviously that is not going to be enough to crack the top 10 list at all. Unfortunately for you, sweet lady. God. Well, that is going to do it for this week's Crown Jewels. Sweet Lady is done. Next week, it is Seaside Rendezvous. Once again, hit that like, hit that subscribe. And if you want to support the channel even more, patreon.com/PLD Projects. Always a great help. You can join a bunch of different people who have already joined up. Some great crew members like Austin Cattell, Jeremiah Morris, Matty Kearns, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, John Lestrina. Couldn't do without you guys. Really couldn't. So I really appreciate your support and all you can do. I understand if you can't join Patreon, not everybody can. But you can help just by liking, just by subscribing, just by sharing. Trying to build a community here. I do love the people I get to talk to every day. It's really been a great part of my life, and it's a really joy to me to be able to spread the love of Queen and movies in my other podcasts. As you'll find me on YouTube, on my main channel, the PLD Project channel. I talk about all sorts of different films on Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film, Class Action, talk Star Wars, Holy Snokes podcast with my buddy Matty Gunner. I do talk about Review, the old 1980s TV sci-fi spectacular, as it were. And of course, you can always find me at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter or at PLD Projects on Twitter. Let me know what you think. Message me, talk to me about what you think about Queen, what you think about Sweet Lady. I'm always up for a conversation. That's it for this week, folks. I really appreciate you stopping by. Until next time, God save the Queen, everybody. Keep yourself alive.